All right, now let's get a political party reaction. We now cross to our reporter Lulama Matya. Lulama, of course, not very good news, especially for consumers. A very, very hard time. Talk to me about just some of the reaction that you are getting there on the ground from political parties.
Good afternoon, Unati and the viewers at home. Indeed, not good news at all, considering that consumers are already under pressure. If you're looking at the price of petrol, which is very high, you look at the prices of food, which is very high, and the cost generally of transport, which is expensive, from your taxis, which have gone up. Many of the associations, after the last fuel increase, they made announcement that their taxi fares are going to increase. But I'm joined to talk further about this, Unati, by the DA spokesperson on finance, Dr. Dion George. Dr. George, not good news, 75 basis point?
Well, we did expect that there was going to be an increase. Inflation is a global problem. And if you look at inflation currently in South Africa, it's now 7.4%. So it was to be expected that SARB was going to make a move in this direction. We have a band between 3 and 6%, and inflation has now breached that band. So it was to be expected. It does, however, mean that there is significant hardship for South African consumers and hardworking South African taxpayers. And it would be expected now that government should do something about that, especially if you look at the fiscal space. People are paying more for transportation, as you said. They're paying more for food. It's becoming very, very difficult. And what is happening is that people are being taxed into poverty. So what government can do right now, it can provide the tax relief that's required. In the first instance, what it can do is stop borrowing so much money, stop the corruption, stop the stealing, use money more appropriately. That should be fairly easy to do. But also cut the tax on fuel. That could be done immediately. We've already looked at the modelling. It is possible. The minister's been promising us for a long time. It's now time to deliver it, because this increase is going to hurt your average South African very much, especially people who have debt and people who are homeowners, not to say the poorest of the poor who are battling already to put food on the table. So now is the time for us to see government responding in an appropriate way. And they can do that if they manage our public finances more prudently.
If we're talking about transport, Dr. George, ordinary South Africans who don't own cars, they are using public transport, they are using taxis. But the public transport in this country has problems. If you look at trains, which can take a number of people, what can be done around that to ease off pressure from people using vehicles and having to pay transport fees?
Well, if we had a public transportation system that worked efficiently, you'd be able to move people around relatively inexpensively. Our train system is not working. That's why the DA has proposed that the City of Cape Town, for example, should take over the rail network and manage it properly. If you give the assets to people who can actually do it properly, you'll find that the system will work. So, for example, if you look at the places where public transport can work, let it work. But the problem is that we have the inefficiencies in government. We have Transnet, for example, that is not doing its job. So change it. That's what is required. Also, if you look, for example, at people that have to catch taxis every single day, the price is going up. Why? Because the petrol price is going up constantly. Why is that happening? It's because government is not doing what it said it would do. There was going to be relief, and there is a lot of space to do that, but there's no political will. Because all that government is doing is borrowing more money, spending it inefficiently, starting to crowd out service delivery. And also at the time when we need it now, when we need money to put into the economy so that you can make life easier for everybody, there isn't any. And the reason for that is because of the mismanagement of the public finances. That's the real problem that we have in South Africa. And until we sort that out, the situation is not going to improve. As you heard the governor say, that inflation is on the way up. So we might very well see further increases. And what is that going to do to your average household? It's going to hurt them even more than it is already. So the picture can actually get a lot worse. And that's why we must take the action right now. Right now, reduce the fuel price by cutting tax on it, make the transportation system work, and if government can't do it, hand it over to people who can. Also, for example, the fiasco that is Eskom, start implementing a model so that we can actually have a reliable energy supply. That's what we need to do. This is not the most difficult thing in the world to do. All you need is political will, and unfortunately, we don't have any.
The fuel relief that was announced by government in April, that is supposed to end next month, did it have any impact? Did consumers feel the benefit?
It would have had an impact, but it was probably a very small impact given the small intervention that was made. What we would have found is it probably would have made life a little bit more difficult than it already is. But it's not enough. What needs to happen is we need to have a fundamental change. We need to slash the fuel price, and it can be done if we can just take the administrative tax out of it. That's what we need to do. The DA has made a comprehensive proposal to it. It's a very sensible proposal. We look at the experts. It is doable. But what we find is government response to say, well, Eskom's not working, so let's start another Eskom 2. That makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. So government is lurching from one bad financial decision to another, and that needs to end, because if that doesn't happen soon, we're going to find that what it looks like now is going to look like a picnic in a few months' time, because the Russian war on Ukraine is not going to end anytime soon, and if government does not improve its ways, it will get worse, and there's no sign that that's going to happen. That's the real problem in South Africa.
Let's leave it there, Dr. Dion George. Thank you very much. As you are saying that the recent rate increase is influenced by outside factors, the war in Ukraine, which he says is not going to end anytime soon. So he's calling on government to implement measures, fiscal discipline measures. I am joined by Matthew Parks, who is the COSATU parliamentary coordinator. Mr. Parks, 75 basis point increase. It must be a blow for the working class.
No, it's a huge blow. It means that workers have less money to take care of their families. It means workers' home loan payments, their credit card, their store payments, whatever debt they might have is now much more expensive. It means less money for workers to buy food for the families. It's a devastating blow, not just to workers but to the economy. Companies are going to struggle to pay workers' salaries. They're going to struggle to hire more workers to help reduce unemployment. So really, it's a massive blow. We must condemn as COSATU in the strongest possible terms the Reserve Bank. This is unnecessary. They could have gone for a much lower repo rate, hike like 25 points. But a 75-point basic hike is going to squeeze workers in the middle class beyond belief. And it's for matters which are beyond South Africa's control. We do not control the war in Ukraine. There's nothing we can do about it. There's nothing we can do about the international oil price. So really, the Reserve Bank is actually going to suffocate the economy into complete standstill. Because what's going to happen next month? Are they going to increase the repo rate again? Because this war in Ukraine is not ending tomorrow. International oil prices are always volatile. So the solution for the Reserve Bank is simply to shut down the economy. When you have a 45% unemployment rate, when workers are highly indebted, are struggling to survive month to month end. But I think as COSATU, we must also condemn government. They are not helping us. The Treasury, the Minister of Treasury Finance, the Minister of Mineral Resources promised the country 3 months ago we're going to reduce the fuel price regime, because currently we pay about 32% of our fuel price goes to taxes, 9 rand a litre. That's a huge part of the inflation increase right now, which has forced the Reserve Bank to hike the repo rate so much. They have promised us to reduce the fuel price regime. They haven't done it. Instead, if they're phasing out the little relief we got 2 months ago, at least they can cut the fuel taxes for the fuel price. There's some relief to the economy that will help to ease workers a little bit. It will help to allow the economy to get back onto its feet. They have not done that. That's 9 rand a litre. They could easily give that relief. We had proposed to government ways to help cut the Eskom debt package of 400 billion rand 3 years ago. They have not moved an inch. And again, one of our biggest causes of inflation is that Eskom is broke, it's highly indebted, it's constantly increasing the electricity tariffs. It has now proposed to NERSA to increase the electricity price by 32%. Government has not moved an inch, yet we can control the fuel price regime, we can control the Eskom debt burden, we can control Eskom electricity tariff hikes. Those are things we can do. Government's not moving an inch on it, yet we're suffocating the economy. It's beyond belief. Equally, we have to ask, where is the Minister of Transport, besides on Twitter? Can he go and do his job for once? Get all metro rail lines fully operational, because that at least will assist 10 million workers, commuters in the cities to move from private transport away from fuel into trains. At least it'll help to boost productivity. But yet we still see 2 years down the road after COVID-19, many metro rail lines in Cape Town and Gauteng not working, and the Minister of Transport is nowhere to be seen.
Talking about the impact of this on workers, recently there was a study by FNB indicating that the majority of middle-income earners spent about 80% of their salaries within 5 days after paying, and now this interest rate hike.
Yeah, so that 5 days will now be reduced to 3 days. Workers are bankrupt, they are broke. Workers who are lucky to have jobs are lucky if they get paid, they're lucky if they get an increase, let alone the increase keeps up with inflation, which is now 7.4%. Even those workers who have jobs, whether they're teachers or work in the private sector, they're supporting relatives who have lost jobs in the past year. We saw 2.2 million jobs being lost. Workers are broke, they're just drowning in debt, and we don't see action by government to assist. We had proposed as COSATU in 2020, in May 2020, 2 years ago, allow workers some limited access to their pension funds, be it in the public sector or the private sector. That's going to help them to plug some holes, pay off debts. They're not going to spend it on luxury goods. They're going to pay off debts, pay off car loans, home loans, whatever it is, store debt. That'll help to stimulate the economy a little bit, help to cushion workers, help to cushion the economy, and government has not moved with speed. They have promised us that by August this year they will table a bill in Parliament to allow workers some access to the debt, that it could come into effect by April next year. This could have been done in 2020, could have been done in 2021. We're now talking about 2023, yet workers are struggling because government's not moving with speed. And we think it's partly because ministers in government don't feel the pain the workers feel. They don't pay for petrol, the government is paying for it. They don't pay for houses, they stay in ministerial houses. They don't worry about all those things. And of course they're paid, 200,000 rand a month. So it's time that politicians really assist the economy, really assist workers. Otherwise workers are going to dump politicians in 2024.
Thank you very much, Mr. Parks. Unathi, let's leave it at that, as he's saying that there was an undertaking by the finance minister that the amendment to the pension fund that will allow workers to access a certain portion of their pensions before they retire. That undertaking was that the bill will be tabled in Parliament in August. We will watch out for that, if indeed is going to be tabled, so that workers can be at least have access to their pension, so that they can pay their debts and ease off pressure because of these tough economic times. With that, back to you at the studio, Unathi.